They got Willa. They got my daughter. I need to find her. Ah!
From acclaimed director Paul Thomas Anderson.
You can save that girl.
Today, experience what is being called the best movie of the year.
This is the end of the line. Not for you.
Leonardo DiCaprio, Sean Penn, Benicio del Toro, Tiana Taylor, Chase Infinity.
Let's go! Here I am.
One battle after another. Now playing only in theaters. Experience it in IMAX. Rated R. Under 17 animated without parent.
You can't hide.
This episode is brought to you by Nespresso and Samra Origins by the Weekend Coffee Collection.
Introducing Samra Origins. My collaboration with Nespresso is a connection to my roots, to my mother, Samra. Coffee that hits the right notes. It transports you. Crafted with unique notes and bold, soaring flavors. Experience a taste that moves you. Nespresso and Samra Origins.
Discover more at Nespresso.com.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
You're listening to the Super Rugby Cymru podcast.
Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the SRC podcast. Joining me, Big M, the one and only Mr. Rob Rees. Good evening, my friend. How are you?
Good evening, sir. We're all good. We're all good. It feels like it's been ages since we've had a bit of a deep dive.
It does. It really does. And this is kind of an issue that we have with these, international breaks. We don't want internationals. We want club rugby. Stick all the internationals in the summer. You don't need them during the season, do we? So last time we left off, we were coming into round 3 of the Cup. So we've got a full round of Cup action and just the one league game to cover. Nice and simple. Not too many. So we'll start off in Pool A. Bridgend hosting Cardiff, and this was a good day for Bridgend. They haven't had a win over Cardiff in quite a long time. I believe you've probably got the more accurate date. So 27-19, limited Cardiff to just the one try in the second half. Fair play to Bridgend. They pulled it out by year. So how long ago was it then, Rob?
Bear with it. Why am I thinking 10? You've caught me out here.
I want to say 8. I want to say 8. I don't know why I'm saying 8.
2017. So yeah, best part of 8 years since the home win against Cardiff. And I'll be honest, it's kind of a bit of a surprise. I don't think many people would have backed Bridgend in this one. It's well and truly finished off Cardiff's Cup campaign. That's it. They're out.
Yeah.
Mathematically they're done. That could help them in terms of getting back on track with this league. But from a Bridgend perspective, this is a big win in probably, I won't say turning around their season, but probably giving them a chance at really swinging into a good run now. We pointed out that they've been missing that sort of win against a top 4 side and that big performance. And whilst this sort of come in a bit of a cup game that's probably not going to mean anything, in all honesty, RGC are probably looking better in the Cup, and Llandovery are looking best of all of the sides in that sort of pool. It's probably into a position where Bridgend now can gather a bit of momentum. They've got the confidence they can beat the top side, because depending on where we look now on the league, because that's probably where we have to go, as the Dogs obviously agree that Bridgend are going to get going here. They could very well be facing Cardiff again in that sort of their first round of sort of the quarterfinals of the playoffs of the league. So it's an interesting one, this, and I think it's finally good to see Bridgend fronting up around the set piece and sort of taking advantage and picking apart this Cardiff side that have done a good job of balancing results, given their under-20s and senior call-ups have sort of ravaged the side at times, I'll be honest.
Yeah. Like in terms of Bridgend, their seasons look pretty good, since Christmas. They've had, this is now their third win. Probably should have beaten Newport, lost by 3 points. The Aberafon game, when they've already beaten them twice in the league and they lose to them in the cup, that's a bit of a blip for them. But obviously they've bounced back in this one. So it is looking good for Bridgend, and they are still in the cup, obviously, and they've got a great chance, seeing as though the two teams above them are the two teams they've got left to play. So, they are in a pretty good position where the cup is concerned, certainly. On the Cardiff front, I don't think anyone would have said, Cardiff are going into the last cup game and it's going to be a dead rubber because they're already out. I don't think anyone would have really predicted that. So
Yes.
I don't know what to think with Cardiff, because I'm just gonna, not for you, not for any of you listeners, but I'm just gonna pull up some of the sides by year, and they're making insane amounts of changes. I'm talking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 changes to the 15 new personnel, and then you've got 1, 2, 3, and another 4 that I believe have either come off the bench or they look like they've all come off the bench, actually. So it's basically 13 changes in that starting 15, which is absolutely ridiculous. But on the same side, I know this is, I think it was Gwilym Bradley's first game back since injury early in the season, so we're happy to have him back. But you had Mackenzie Martin in this Cardiff side. Now, I know one player doesn't make a team, but when you've got a Welsh international coming into your club rugby side, realistically, you've got to be doing better. Surely him on his own should have given you a hell of a lot of front football. So,
Well, that's just it. You look at the relative strength of this Cardiff side. Yes, they made a lot of changes. Their back line is, I'll be honest, looking pretty weak in terms of depth, and the bench is pretty ravaged. But their pack is still very much a similar pack to what we've seen all season. Yes, Bradley come back, but again, that's not a bad change. That's a top quality player who might just lack a bit of match fitness, but you'd expect him to whack out a really solid 40 minutes at minimum. As you say, then Martin, back in the side again. It's good to see he wants to play in these sort of games, but I sort of don't really know where Cardiff feel they want to sit with these sort of fixtures. Was it 4 points from 3 games now in the cup? And whilst they've rotated, I don't know if it feels like they're developing all that much. I'd like to see a few more combinations stick in and certain players having a bit more of a consistent selection around the match day squad. 'Cause you can't change 13 of 23 players and then expect to be consistent in both performance and results. So yeah, I think Cardiff have had a weird one ever since that first under-20s break. I don't know if Dan Fish and the team have quite got it right down there. They've got a lot of good young talent coming through, and you can see what they've done the last couple of seasons. And Cardiff have probably been one of the better developing teams in terms of giving everyone game time and balancing senior players coming back in for rugby. But it just doesn't feel like they've got that this season, and that's probably indicative of Cardiff Rugby having a small budget and a small threadbare squad that relies on, I call them the fringe players, either young players or like your Jason Harries, who sort of plays across the two teams, that sort of player. They're not bad players, but they're bouncing around so much that there's just no consistency, and that's what's hurting Cardiff, and that's why I think it's still such a surprise that they're still, I want to say top 4 because of the gaps a bit bigger out of that, but still basically within a couple of points of leading the SRC.
Yeah, they are. They are in a good place in the league. Only 2 points off the top. I know the top 3 really are so close. So we might come on to a bit of league action in a bit. So the other game in Pool A was a sort of top of the table clash. Nice and early on into this cup competition. So Llandovery heading up to RGC, and I want to get this right. I believe that this is where RGC really give Llandovery a good showing at the beginning of the season. You know,
Yeah.
they did the champions on their own patch. Obviously, only second weekend. I've got it up now, so happy days. So, this must have hurt. For anyone who doesn't already know, I'm guessing everyone who listens will know this result, but 28-61 to Llandovery. If that's not a statement, I don't know what is.
Yeah, I think this is one of those ones you look back at that first run, and it was part of the run of games where Llandovery hadn't won and were needing victories before going back to sort of Church Banks. They obviously played, it was at 3 games away from home whilst their pitch was still getting ready at the start of the season. But we've sort of come full circle, and I mentioned it, I think, on the last pod, and said RGC are the sort of side they play good rugby, but with ball in hand. They don't play good overall rugby. And I think that's what's caught them out here. Again, we've got another 80 plus point game that involves RGC. I think that's half a dozen for the season, and they've all been at Colwyn Bay. So that gives an idea of how many points people are scoring, and it's not always, against them. I mean, they scored 60 against Pontypool, I think it was, they brought the 60 up. But you only got to sort of look back over that game, and it was just so basic in terms of what was going wrong. Front silly tackles. I think Llandovery's first try, you can count the missed tackles, and you're nearly on your second hand, and that's the first try. As good as the rugby was, and Llandovery just started turning into a sevens team towards the end because they were having an absolute field day. The basic, RGC, I was so disappointed at the ruck structure. The pillars are missing. Well, straight away, you got fast opposition. I'm not talking just running speed. I'm talking about your mental speed and your ruck speed. International rugby wants to play at, sub 3 second rucks. But if you haven't got pillars in club rugby, you're allowing teams to do exactly that because it's just a pick and go. But it's not a pick and go into a defensive player. It's into space, and all of a sudden, the fullbacks having to make far more, tackles and get far more involved in the game than he wants to on the defensive side. And I think as a result, this has got very ugly very quickly, and I think RGC just crumbled. It was one of those, once the 30, 40 points were up, that was it. It was like going back to school rugby where everyone goes towards the ball and no one really knows what's happening. You're just going out there and literally just throwing it around. I think towards the end you could see Llandovery were doing that as well, and I think RGC got a bit of a late points, to boost that score up a little bit, but I'll be honest, the 20 odd points that they did score probably flatters themselves. The scoreboard could have been a lot wider. And I think this is the biggest disappointment, or not disappointment, but the biggest work on that Josh Leach will have now going from this season into next. Is nobody expected. I think most of us, if not all of us, put RGC as 10th this year. So they're exceeding expectations across the league. Like I said, they are still second in the pool. They're level on points with Llandovery, but have played the game extra. So all in all, it probably does mean that they're likely to miss out on the final. On the good hand, if RGC do make the cup final, it'll be played on a Saturday or Sunday. So come on, RGC. Fuck the WRU. Playing a cup final on a fucking Thursday. Thursday. Oh, thank you. We'll have a broadcast on a Thursday.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'm going in early, man. I'm going in early.
He's lost it.
It's gone 9 o'clock. We'll say it's gone 9 o'clock. It's 22 minutes past 8. That's the watershed for podcasts.
I love it. I absolutely love it. And I was going to try and be a bit positive. But wow, you just blown me out of it. So, yeah, I got final Thursday. Oh, no. Like,
yeah.
Even a Friday's bad, but, it's like, this is just so much wrong. But we got to put a dent in that because we really can. I mean, the one positive is that hopefully we'll be recording the podcast and we'll have the team sheets for the final. That's the only positive I can think of. But knowing our luck, they'll probably keep them tight knit so we don't actually. But yeah, so RGC, they have got a big problem, but for me, with RGC, there's so much potential there. And I know they talk about the North Wales region, as not having as many. They cover everywhere. So in terms of players per region that's realistically coming into them, they're more or less the same as what each of the four down south have individually. I know it'll vary slightly in certain places. So they've got their own academy system. So realistically, this is something that they should be driving in is a defensive structure, because that's what gives you a professional contract. You don't need to be a superstar making X factor that he plays beating people for fun. If you tackle hard, you get into shape, you work hard. They're the main things anyone wants. So that is obviously massive work on for RGC. Only positive I can think of, they scored 4 tries. They got a bonus point. I think they can take that away. Llandovery friend, obviously very, very happy with the 6 points. You can't not be. A couple of people returned, Kean Abraham, who's been out for a long, long time. Tommy Lewis as well. Very much expect him to go back up with the Scarlets, but it was nice to see him come back down. He had a good few years playing in this top Welsh division before he buggered off to Jersey and became a superstar. So I do like how Llandovery are using this competition, because they're sprinkling a couple of new players here and there. It's like in the first game we had Sam Potter, who plays most of his rugby with Ammanford. I believe he's with the Dragons Academy now. So, brilliant for him. So they had Sam Potter and Lee Rees as the halfbacks. And now the second game, they got Johan Hughes and George McDonald as their halfback. So they got one experienced halfback, one less experienced halfback. So I do like that. First game, Lee Rees hasn't started at 9 for Llandovery this season, by the way. So, that kind of tells you how instrumental this guy is to the Drovers as well. So, that's 11 wins on the bounce. Tian Sparrow got his first start. Big things expected of this kid. First year senior rugby, got a try. It's nice. And it's just all around positive. And if you score 61 points and you can't be positive, then there's an issue. But thankfully, I can be. Like you already touched on, the top of the cup now, 11 points, tied with RGC. They've got the game in hand. I don't think anyone's really seeing anyone other than Llandovery as winning this group, but still plenty of options. 4 teams still very much in there. And the way teams are being selected obviously differs massively from the league, so we don't quite know what's going to happen in front of us. And as we've already seen, there's been plenty of shocks.
Yeah, I think this game was really good in terms of the squad selection. You say you got Llandovery show exactly what this is all about. Somebody coming back from injury, Tommy Lewis, Kean Abraham, long layoffs, get them playing. One is more of a Llandovery player, the other is a Scarlets dropping down. George McDonald at 10 had a really good game, and this is the sort of game you want him in. Fast, open, lots of points. Yeah. He's such a sharp, open player, and when he's looking at it, is you only got to turn around and say, put him in there. As you said, when you're resting Lee Rees for the first time, put someone in there, give him confidence. You look at the other side then, RGC 11, you mentioned the academy system, 11 of that RGC side have come through that North Wales academy system. 6 of the starting pack have come through that system, and they've got something nice building. They've got the experience. They brought some back, some familiar faces. They're having some good crowds, in fairness to them. Yes, that'll only ever translate into home crowds because of the commute. But fair play, what they've got up there is something building nice. I think if they can build that sort of pack and sort of iron out these mistakes and sort of walk away from the slightly sloppy, haphazard rugby, which is sort of, throwing it into the wind, I guess, just calm it down a bit, which I guess Josh and his team will sort of add a bit of structure to. I think this RGC side can go, a long way. I mean, I'm not saying that next season they're going to be a silverware contending team, but depending on it, if the cup format stays the same, you never know. And just touching on that, there's a very interesting one. We said that this is probably the easier side of the draw, and the fixtures we've still got to come in Pool B. But finishing top, but it's also about getting those points, and the 6 point as well, Mark, which we talked about before we went live, is of how that sort of varied and added something to the season. But the side who finishes with the most points out of the top two teams will be hosting the final. So all of a sudden, that's a massive boost, especially, let's assume it's not RGC. You're going to be playing it on a Thursday. That home advantage, forget the sort of the crowd benefit and the income and the familiarity. You haven't got a bus trip for 24 boys, to have to try and all get off work and travel, a couple of hours, sort of at worst. So there's a lot to play for here, and definitely a lot to sort of rack up. I mean, that RGC, as you said, the bonus point, how vital could that be if Llandovery do come unstuck at sort of clawing back a sort of a top place finish?
Exactly. So we'll go into Pool B now, and we'll start with another high-scoring game, and that was Newport hosting Carmarthen Quins, 47-26. I mean, I don't think the scoreline quite reflects how the game went. Newport were always in the ascendancy. They were always going to win. Floodgates kind of opened up towards the end. Carmarthen Quins did really claw back into this one. They did. I think they brought it back to either 1 or 2 scores. And, they were really in a position where, okay, I don't think they would have kicked on and won the game, but they certainly could have kicked on and got that second losing bonus point. So, I mean, in terms of Quins, as always, you've got to look for the positives. When Tom Phillips isn't playing, they don't like to win. So, Tom, please come back. I'm getting sick of Carmarthen Quins losing. You've got a bonus point against Newport. Brilliant. In terms of the cup, I mean, it's really hard to see someone outside of, the Gwent 3, or I don't know, the Dragons trio. I don't know how you really want to call these three. So, Carmarthen Quins are out, essentially, yeah.
Yeah, so I think Quinn started on a bit of a back foot. The 6 point loss to Ebervale in their opening game. As you said, this one was 19-12 at one stage. I think it was 26-12 by half time. But this wasn't a runaway train Newport performance. And I think Carmarthen have just lost that bit of a bite and a bit of an edge recently. I don't know whether it's squad fitness or whether losing. I think they're losing a couple of key names. I mean, Yori Badham's been out for a little while and probably won't be seen for quite some time, if until next season, judging on the sort of injury he's got. Tua Pilot, who's now in France, and Titcombe's probably going to spend the rest of the season with the Scarlets. I mean, Tom Curry's been in and out of the sides. He's starting to come into it a bit more now, and I'm surprised about sort of his sort of selection at the start of the season. So I'm not really sure if Steph down there has decided on his strongest 15 or strongest pack, and Quins have always typically had a very good pack. They've got a young front row, and I think that's, or by and large, a young front row out there. I think they've lost quite a bit of experience in that area the last couple of seasons. But Newport are one of those teams at the moment. You don't really know. They're the France of the SRC, which Newport is turning up. You're either having a bit of a juggernaut turns up, and here we go. Newport are piling the tries in. Hewitt had another hat trick the other week, and he's got 4 tries in 2 games. And all of a sudden he's stepping back up to his sort of senior rugby. You thinking this is the Newport side we was expecting to see more of, I guess, across the season. But they're having just those little blips again that make you feel that they're not quite performing. But yeah, I think Newport would have been happy with the end result rather than the full performance. And as I said, more, especially in this pool where you've got Ebervale, Pontypool and Newport all within a couple of points of each other, and with some of those still to play each other, it's very much a case of those extra bonus points could go a long way, not just in getting the final at your ground, but in this pool, getting you into the final.
Yeah, 100%. No, I'm going back over Quinn's team sheet now, and this this patch, these cup games, the game against Swansea, sandwiched in between, you know, they've been using, who is in now, Ali Thomas, Charlie Titcombe, more or less constant, and they've come into these games. Is it Ocean Jones, I believe, who I think he played the first game at 10 at the start of the season as well, and then Ellis Payne. And Ellis Payne is, he's a really good young player, but he's come from Newcastle Emlyn, where he's been playing all his rugby at fullback. I mean, I think there's a question whether he's a 10 or 15 to be had there going forward, but he's coming up a level and into a position where he's not got any sort of form to come into. Whereas when I talked with Llandudfri just now about Sam Potter's playing 10 for Ammanford. They've been absolutely brilliant. He's come into this side and he's playing 10. So, it's not a totally seamless transition, but a transition that's made easier. I don't think that is quite the case here. And then you look at your halfbacks. You had Rodri Lewis is for Payne's first appearance, then Archie Hughes, and now back to Lewis. So bit of bouncing around, you always want some consistency in there. So I'm not pointing to that one player as the sole purpose, as the sole reason they're losing. They're not. It's 100% not. This kid could be amazing. You never know how they're going to turn out. But when you're looking at a losing side that's literally lost every single game since the 22nd of November was the last win. You've got to look at all the small details, what's going wrong. It is a consistency of selection, is a game plan. I mean, I know Tommy Lewis turned out for Drovers. He was with Quins the week before. Things like that don't always help out. But, obviously you've got to work with your region as such. I mean, I'm all for working with the region to bring players in, but I'm talking about bringing players in for chunks of a time, one game and done. I don't agree with one and dones. I don't like them.
Do you know what? I think that's the one thing Quins have struggled with is their allocation is good, and they had another 5 players in that Newport game from the Scarlets, the half-backs, both of those being included in that. But as you say, it's very in and out with who they get and when. And you can't build any consistency with that. I think Quins' season started to fall away when Lewis Morgan got injured at the start of the season. He scored like 8 tries in something like 6 or 7 games, was the leading top try scorer, and then didn't feature for something like 3 months. And whilst you sort of can't say, oh well, one player makes a team. Well, sometimes if a team builds their game plan around one player and how that sort of a hooker going out would be, the maul going and stuff like that. It very quickly becomes apparent it's a team's strength and weaknesses. And I think you look at this, you look at the pack, and they had some experience in there. They had some top quality boys. They've got some good allocation. But I don't think Gabe McDonald has shown his best during allocation. I think he showed a lot more with Llandudfri, and that's possibly understandable with the players you perhaps got around you. But he's been in and out of that midfield sort of duo all sort of season, and you just get that sort of feeling that Quins need a bit of balance. We've mentioned it around other teams and sort of picking them in key areas. Quins have probably turning week to week players over more than just about anybody. And it'd be interesting to see the end of season figures around total players used. I think they'll be high up on that list, but also the turnover week to week is probably going to be quite high up as well, because that's an important factor. You could use 30, you're not going to use 30 players in a season, but you could use 40 or you could use 60. But if that 40 are changing 23 one week and you changed 17 players to the next, all of a sudden you got no balance. And as you say, it's a bit of a where do you go now as Quins. The cup is done. You probably look at building a bit of momentum and trying to find those partnerships and find your best 15, because they are very likely to be dragged into that bottom 4 playoff, the sort of your prelims, I guess, in the league to put them into the quarterfinals, and you need to be in the best shape, because a side like Quins won't want to lose. They'll want to go into that quarterfinals and take on whoever it is they're going to be facing.
Yeah, I mean, absolute best case scenario for Quins in terms of the player availability is that they get Charlie Titcomb back for the final 4 league games. But that's pending another player's return from a pretty lengthy injury. So there's too many variables there. They need to. It's easy enough saying this from the outside in, and this is all we ever really do. We're not there on a Tuesday and Thursday, taking training, watching training, and being there on every Saturday watching games. So it's easy to sit here and say these things. We don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but it does look as though they need to just go. This is our 15 for, I don't know. Let's say there is 4 league games left. This is our 15 for these 4 games. That's it. If there's an injury, if one of you boys can't do it for work or whatever, that's the only reason we're going to change it now, and just stick with that and see what happens, because you never know. I was really interested when you pulled up Lewis Morgan's name. So obviously we have seen him back, but at the same time, someone who would be competing with him for that number 2 shirt is Isaac Young, and I think he's only got 2 or 3 appearances to his name this entire season. So loads of little things that are really affecting the Quins, and hopefully we'll see them pull their finger out a bit and get another win very, very soon. So on to the next game, and this was a big one. The big one, some might say. Well, the biggest one we're going to talk about? Oh, I don't know about that. But Ebbw Vale travelling to Pontypool and just sneaking it by the thinnest of margins. Pontypool were looking at the ball. Someone was paying the ref off on the side, and next thing you know, there's an extra 7 points on the board. That's all I heard. I'm only joking. Nothing like that ever really happened. Ebbw Vale 18, Pontypool 13. So a bit of revenge from earlier in the season in the league. Tell me how you feeling about this one. Was it a big enough win?
It was probably not a big enough win. I mean, the conditions are absolutely dreadful, but you look at that first half, and they probably left another 2 tries out there. And then that's not being, Ebbw Vale were on top, and they literally left 2 tries out there. Griff Tuff knocked one on right across the line. He also scored one, and it was a brilliant darting run from the base of the line out for his score. But you just get that feeling that Ebbw Vale couldn't quite shake Pontypool off. And ultimately, I mean, Morgan Allen's try, he smashes 3 men out the way. None of them can get the tackle on. He somehow gets it down. If it's a dry conditions, does he get there? Probably not. But I think Jason Strange will be disappointed how they conceded that 1 try. But it all sort of turned a little bit early in that second half. Cam Davis went off with a hamstring injury, which was a little bit worrying for Ebbw Vale, given their centre options, with Ethan Phillips still out as well. But that sort of stage where I think it was at 13-12 to Pontypool, I think it was, and you're sort of going, how are Ebbw Vale in this situation where Pontypool last year won it in the last 10 minutes of the game, just before Christmas in that sort of game. Ebbw Vale were just so poor, and so sloppy, and sort of Pontypool marshalled him out, and I won't say comfortably dealt with it, but relatively comfortably dealt with it. Evan Lloyd then misses a penalty. And I think the key thing here is that's not a nice pitch to kick off when it's churned up and you've had 75 minutes of rugby on it, right? So for him to go out there and nail another couple, you could just see that Ebbw Vale defence was coming back out on top. I think at the moment, that's what's winning Ebbw Vale games. I think they've gone away from that rolling maul, and people are trying to combat that. They've looked a lot better in midfield and the distribution, and Cam Davis has been an absolute revelation, and how the Dragons ever released him, I'll never know, because he's playing so well at the moment, and luckily his hamstring injury was sounding like he'd be back pretty much straight away. Obviously missed the Newport game last week, but this is probably a must-win for both sides. I sort of feel Pontypool now have to beat Newport, but it's not in their hands because Ebbw Vale play Newport. Depending on the result of that game will determine on basically Pontypool's sort of fortune, but only a win will do for Pontypool to go through. But yeah, I think Ebervale that set them up nicely. Like you said, they had Quinn's 6-pointer. You have a bit of you have a week off. You got to come back and face some tough ties. So yeah, that's put them in a really good stead in what's a tough run of fixtures for them on paper.
Yeah. So, Pontypool, obviously, they're going to be gutted with this. They don't like losing on their own patch, but it's happened. And I'm just looking at this table now, and I know I referenced, was it a big enough win? And the way the table currently looks, you've got Newport on 12, played 2, Pontypool 11 points, played 3, and Ebu on 10, played 2. So, obviously, the next round of fixtures is, Ebu Vale at home to Newport. Now, we'll talk about this game a little bit more once we get to it in previewing the fixtures in the coming week. But you're now in a position where Ebu Vale can win this game, say win 4 points. Newport get the 2 losing bonus points. So they both go into the final round on 14 points. Ebu Vale can get a 4 or 5 point win in that game, and Newport get a 6-point win. And Newport go through to the final, winning only 3 games, and Ebu Vale get nowhere, having won 4. So this format, this extra bonus point, has created quite a conundrum by you, which I'm really enjoying. I spoke to you before coming on here. I was really skeptical about this, this extra bonus point going to attacking sides, but really it's turned out to be a really good addition, because you've got to put teams away, and if you don't put them away, then you're risking your spot both in the cup and in the league, and this is now what Ebu Vale find themselves in doing.
Yeah, and this is the Six Nations all over, right? Where if you get the Grand Slam, you get additional bonus points because you could ultimately win all your games and still miss out on the championship if it wasn't for those additional bonus points. In theory, it's never happened, and I don't think it ever will. But this is the massive tie because you look at the last round of fixtures. Ebervale travelled to Swansea. Now, I'm not saying that that's going to be a 6-pointer, but everyone's probably expecting a relatively comfortable win down there, depending on your conditions and what you're looking at. Meanwhile, and I'm sure the game's at Rodney Parade, it's Newport versus Pontypool. And that is an absolute humdinger. So this is where, as you say, Newport have to chase these additional points here. Not because I don't think they got enough to not beat Pontypool, but you look at those fixtures and go, you probably, try and get something out of this game. Close, keep the gap with Ebervale. Obviously Newport are going to want to win this, but if you can go into that final game at home and you're not relying on a 6-pointer, is an absolute massive boost. And as you say, Llandovery have got a point on Ebervale at the moment, but they haven't got their point behind Newport. So again, it all comes around to if you can host the final, that they've already got a point extra, but obviously Newport's fixtures. So it's, as you say, it adds that additional layer of jeopardy here. And this is what I like. This is what I want and enjoy people seeing, discussing is. You see it at the moment in the football and all the graphics today. When can Liverpool win the Premier League? When can they win it? Depending on what they do, what Arsenal do, and all the rest. Fans love talking about this sort of thing. And when can it? Well, what if Ebervale win this week? And what do they have to do? Is it in their hands? Is it in Newport's hands? I think the only team that don't really have it in their own hands is Pontypool at the moment.
Yeah.
But like I said, and we'll get on to this one in a bit, Newport are going to be out for revenge after last week's league game, which we'll sort of cover. So this is very much bragging rights. I think you could see that Tyrone Morris was hurt after, he was hurting after that loss in the league. And I don't think it's going to vary much in the conditions. Now, I think this is the sort of game that Newport are going to try and load up with, and we'll see a few more players. We saw obviously Alejandro back in the league, sort of last week, but obviously we've seen Hewitt in recent weeks and sort of players along those sort of lines. So I think very much here, this is Newport do or die. obviously the way that the league works, they're still well within a chance of silverware there. But this is redemption, opportunity. Forget the ramifications of the pool. You know, they taped over the Ebervale logo, got called out on TV and got fucking thumped. And then Tyler Morris quickly bypassed the question on, when he was asked it. Yeah, this is literally, you could see if they go out and win that game, we taped over it, all fine. They were hurting, and that's the power of these Gwent derbies, to mix it all in. So yeah, I think the pool stages have gone a lot better and still have a lot to give than what we were probably anticipating.
Yeah, 100%. And that does kind of wrap up that round 3 quite nicely, but there. So as the way these have been set out and scheduled, there was a gap week, and so we were back into league action. So first up, we went to Pontypool to watch them against Aberafan, but sadly nothing happened. The game got called off. Yada, yada, yada. What a surprise. Another game gets called off in the SRC, and this game is now going to be on the 8th of March. So very, very exciting for that one. And the other game was, I don't really think it had much of an impact on the league or anything like that. It was, Newport traveling over to Ebbw Vale. So, this one was covered live. And I don't think the weather conditions really helped it for a live game. They would have probably been better off leaving it where it was originally. But, as is, that's life. You can't help it. So, Ebbw Vale 20, Newport 5. And, watching this game, I don't think there was ever a point where I honestly thought Newport might actually win this. It might actually come back. And, that's a sad thing for a team that I've spoken about at this, earlier in the season as, being still classed as one of the top 2, despite their league position, because they've got backs and forwards that can match you with the best of them. I don't even know how to explain what this Newport performance was. It's quite hard to quantify it in that way. So, I'll throw the ball to you to try and not be too smug about it now. What really went wrong for Newport?
Yeah, I think for starters, I think they came up with a bit of a weird game plan. So they passed up on points, so 3 times inside the first quarter, elected to kick for touch all of those times. I'm not sure if that's tactical and they back themselves to get the sort of the rolling maul going, or whether they felt that Ebbw Vale had enough to score tries and they would have to do the same. But it seemed an odd call, given who they had at 10 in Matt O'Brien and his kicking, although in the end he missed his one and only kick in the game come full time. But they just seem to lack any energy. That Ebbw Vale fronted up massively. That the scrum, Newport conceded 5 penalties off the first 5 scrums. The only thing that stopped the scrum being absolutely obliterated was when Joe Franchi got yellow carded in open play for half an hour in, and then the scrums roughly evened out until probably 10 minutes before the end. The lineouts, Curtis Gregory, I think, stole best part of half a dozen off Newport, and I think that is uncharacteristic in itself. I'm quite surprised we didn't see Garen Harris come off the bench a little bit earlier. Obviously scored the only try, but they just seemed to lack that little bit of composure. There was no edge. They seemed to want to throw the ball around, but they couldn't get anywhere with it. And that's a lot of credit to Ebbw Vale. It wasn't easy conditions for either side. It's not easy conditions to defend or play attacking rugby. So in the end, it probably benefited nobody that was how the game sort of went. As you said, I was watching on from the terrace, and it never seemed like Newport got out of second gear. They never looked like troubling. And I've got to be honest, they never looked like scoring until they somehow did. The Ebbw Vale defence was so good. The penalty count was something north of, I think, 45 between the two clubs. It was not a good day on that sort of front. And that sort of broke things down. But it had all the sort of makings of a really nice game. It is a shame that the conditions didn't quite play to that. But I think what we've seen is that Ebervale can very much play to the conditions, but they can change it up. Everyone was expecting with the back line, Obi back at 10, and yes, they had a couple of wingers out, but when you can call on sort of the likes of Ollie Andrew to come back in, that's not a bad option at all. And the try of the game came from a reverse out the back switch on an inside line for Harry Rees-Weldon, who's just been left out of the Wales under-20 squad to curl around the full-back and go under the post. So obviously he made a statement to Richard Whiffen ahead of the last couple of rounds of selection there. But every aspect Newport just lost. It was very, very flat and disappointing. And you only got to look at the Newport Facebook comments after the game, and a lot of people are trying to blame the pitch. But I think there's only one thing to blame here, and that's the lack of energy the team seemed to bring from the get-go. They couldn't match it. Um, and it sort of fell apart from there. And that's why I said this has been a redemption. This isn't just a loss. Oh, boys, we played well. This is a good Ebervale team. Beat us up there. We'll go again. This was one of the worst Newport performances I'd seen for ages. It was very much. And again, Ebervale could have had another two similar to the Pontypool game. Sean Parry knocks on going over the line, but off an advantage. Could have been another. That's 7 points right there. So yeah, this is a very surprising Newport performance. They haven't been at their best this season, but Ebervale marshalled them out well and truly.
Yeah. So in terms of league positions, they both started this game, third and fourth. Ebervale have jumped up to first now, but there was 2 points between them. Newport on 50, Ebervale on 52. This really was, a must-win game for both sides, and it was kind of a shame the way that it planned out. But we can't do nothing about it now, so we'll put that in the rear view because we've got.
I got to say, it summed it up that, for anyone who watched it, Matt O'Brien's conversion at the end, Newport's try was in vain because he missed the conversion and it meant that Ebervale took the 5 points because they finished 15 points ahead. And that sort of just summed up Newport's evening in the end. But I think that the key thing here is that's 2 games at Eugene Cross against Pontypool and Newport. Ebervale have scored over 50 and conceded 8.
That is something. Fair play to him. That is something. So that wraps up all the games we've got for the past 2 weeks. And so we'll go on to the current upcoming weekend. So round 4 of the Cup. So this will be some teams' final games. I think it's only actually one team from each pool is the final game. I'll correct myself on that. So we start off in Pool A as always. So Cardiff against Aberafan. Managed to hear off a couple of coaches for these little previews. So, Jason Hyatt, will enjoy and preparing to play Cardiff on a fast track. Traditionally these games, are great to watch and he doesn't see this being any different. So my interpretation from that is they're looking to run everything. They want to play some expansive rugby.
Yeah, I think this is their opportunity, right? Is you only got to look at where Aberafan are. They're sort of middle of the group, 2 games played, 6 points. So they're probably not in a good position to get out of this pool. And this is probably one of those games. It's a dead rubber for Cardiff, so they're going to be throwing everything at it. Aberafan want to try and build a bit of momentum. They're probably in a good position to hit the top 6, avoid those preliminary playoffs in the league.
Playoff game, yeah.
So, they've got a bit of, let's build momentum here, boys. Let's attack this game. Nothing to lose. And I think this has got all the makings of a very good game. Aberafan have played some fantastic rugby recently. That the Newport game was one of the games, if not the game of the season to date, over in the league. And this is a bit of a statement point now, I think. We mentioned about Bridgend having to beat one of the big 4. Can Aberafan now go out there, make a statement, and beat one of those top 4? They've come close against Newport. They haven't welcomed Ebervale to tag yet in that rearranged fixture. But there's a lot to like about this Aberravon side. You know, they've got a lot of experience still within the squad. You know, they welcome him back the likes of Scott Del Nevo off under 20s, and he's been absolutely outstanding even in the Six Nations. Brindley Thomas coming up. I know John spoke heavily about him, and he's an absolute unit. And speaking to Jason Hyatt after that Newport game, he's only got loads of ambition for the young man as well. And this is what it's all about. They are such a good side to watch, Aberravon, when they get going. I just hope there's a bit of good weather for this one, because I think this could be an RGC special, and so we could see 60, 70 points in this one. And that's what you want. You want two sides going at it. Relatively nothing to play for. Cardiff, nothing realistically other than pride and development and a bit of momentum. Turns out there's quite a bit to play for in the end. But yeah, this is what you want. These sort of middle ties that don't really have a lot riding on them are still high quality affairs that people are interested in seeing.
I mean, I'm looking at this from a slightly different perspective from Aberravon. Obviously, Cardiff are out of this cup, but mathematically speaking, Aberravon could still qualify. Like, my voice is shaking a little bit, but there, because that's my level of belief. But Llandovery don't, unless Llandovery get the 6 points, this weekend, that does kind of kill it to a certain extent. But I'll say that doesn't happen. Obviously a 6 point does not guaranteed no matter who you're playing against. So Aberravon, I do expect Aberravon to win this game. I'm going to make that clear just because of how Cardiff have approached it.
Aberravon have to win it as well. If Llandovery take anything more than 2 points from this game and Aberravon don't win, that's Aberravon's cup done. So basically, Aberravon have to win this game to keep any hope alive. Otherwise, they're mathematically out before they've even got to their final game.
Yeah, but this is something that I'm liking again about this 6 pointer, is that any sort of drop in points, will lend to one team or another. And I know that's true normally, but this is, that extra bit again to push forward to it. So, I'm expecting Aberravon to win this one, and I'm hoping that whatever turns out, in Llandovery Bridgend game, that they're still within 6 points going into the final week, because that would mean that Aberravon get to play Llandovery and first be on the line. And, it's that tag, that Aberravon Llandovery game. So that would be brilliant for the cup in itself. If we go back into the pool, into this specific game, Joe's not here to talk positively about Cardiff. I'm certainly not going to do it for him this week. So yeah, I am back in Aberravon. Cardiff need they regular boys, and it's hard to deal without them. They've done fairly well. I will still put that to them. They have managed this okay when you think about the number of changes they have had to deal with. But yeah, I don't see outside of Aberravon for this, and I'm happy to see that, and I'm sure John listening in is very happy to hear that people are back in Aberravon other than himself. So over to that second game, we got Llandovery at home to Bridgend. Now Bridgend are in the exact same position as Aberravon, whereas they're on 6 points. If they get a win in this one, they put themselves in line to qualify for the cup. So it's going to be incredibly difficult for them to do that, coming up against a side that is 11 wins on the bounce, and they've just put 60 points on. I wouldn't even say a poor side. They have, like you said earlier, exceeded expectations this season. So this is a big task for Bridgend. I'm always going to back Llandovery year, regardless. So try and big up Bridgend a bit for me. Go on.
Yeah, this is why I think Bridgend needed that sort of Cardiff performance. This is a massive sort of couple of weeks for them now in terms of keeping hopes alive and a lot to back. I think if this was at the brewery field, you're probably looking at a really close game. I'm back in all the home teams actually in this pool this week. But whilst Llandovery, I think, are gonna pull away from this ultimately. I think they've got a bit too much up front and a lot behind to put the points away. Unfortunately for Bridgend, this is one you can certainly attack. There's a lot on it. Scott Baldwin's spoken in the week about sort of where he thinks they are at the moment, and he's very positive and a very forward-thinking coach. He doesn't take losses too difficultly. He's very open in terms of performance, not just results. Obviously, results are what get you in the end, but he seems a sort of person to say, boys, we've lost a game, but we've played well. And last week, they'll take double confidence. They've played well, and they've beaten Cardiff. I think fronting up will give them that big boost as well. I think they need to head into this game knowing what they want to do, knowing that this is basically do or die. Aberravon have got another week, effectively, as long as they win. Basically, if Bridgend lose this is them done because the land have reopened up the gap at the top. I think from a neutral perspective, I think it'd be nice if Bridgend could get the win. It opens that pool right up again. And as you say, it brings a lot onto the final sort of round of fixtures. But this is well and truly a sort of a turning point in Bridgend's season again. Is what I said is they sort of pick up a few results and then have just that bit of a deceleration. And this is where they can't afford to take the foot off the gas. Yes, it's Llandovery. Yes, it's Church Bank. But you need to put in another big performance here. And I think that's what Scott will want from his players more than anything, is that performance to back the Cardiff result up. Because if you can't do that, that's not a good team. You've got to be consistent, across your whether it's 20 games, 30 games, whatever you end up playing in a season. If you're not consistent, you won't challenge for silverware in any of these competitions.
100%, I'm with you there. And I spoke a bit earlier about Bridgend being on a good vein of form, since Christmas, and I do expect a decent performance. I expect a good performance from them.
Yeah.
I'd like to think that Llandovery won't run away with it, but again, Llandovery, we never know quite what gear they're going to turn up with, and half the time their first gear is enough to beat some teams, which just goes to show the level they are at. So, into Pool B, and a couple of redemption games going on by here. So, Carmarthen Quins at home to Swansea. Just, what was it, about a month ago? Well, not a month for us. So, about 3 weeks ago, Carmarthen travelled to Swansea, and Swansea bagged the win on them in the league. So, this would have, hit Quins hard. And, I managed to get a word in off of Steph Thomas at DOR. We're looking forward to playing Swansea and looking to repeat our early season form, against them. Boys have worked incredibly hard, as you'd expect, and the young talent we have coming through really does excite us for the run-in. Now, I can read into that as much as I want. I can read that and saying they know they've got young boys. They're scared these young boys are going to take a bat to them, but they're excited about those young boys. So you can interpret this in whatever way and create whatever narrative you want. The one I'm going to go with is they've got bags of talent, and they're just waiting to finally click and explode on someone. And that's going to happen this week. And they're going to run in 1,000 tries and break all records known to man. In all seriousness, I know you're backing all home teams. I'm not backing all home teams, but Carmarthen is not the one I'm not backing. So I do expect Quins to have just a little bit too much for Swansea this time round. Just the simple fact that it's in Carmarthen, I think that is a massive factor for them. And Swansea are getting better. They are looking better. Since they picked up that first win over Aberravon, they have been a much improved side, which is happy for everyone in the league. But it is a bit of a dead rubber. That's the only problem I've really got with this one.
I think this game probably tells us where either of these sides are for the remainder of the season. I think for Swansea, this is the ideal fixture. They've got a Quinn side struggling for form. Yes, it's away, but they've got the ideal chance here to turn this around, put in a really big performance, get a first away win of the season because the 2 wins have come at St. Helens. Really give themselves that opportunity, kick on. This shows sides that you're coming up from that bottom, in that 10th place in the league. You're rising now up a level. You are actually competing with that next block of 4 or 5 teams. Then on the other hand, you've got Quins, who, as we've already said, are massively out of form, but have got a good side. This is an opportunity against, whilst they're an improving Swansea side, a poor Swansea side. You're in your own backyard. You know what to do. You know which way the bloody swings go. Let's really get into this game, and this is an opportunity for Quins to get some points on the board. Bring back that confidence, bring back the scrum that everyone goes, well, hang on a minute, Quins are going to give us a bit of a run out here. Get the set piece going. If Isaac Young does get another game at hooker, let's get that set piece, motoring, and these young boys at the Scarlets can get their hands on some tidy ball, because that's what they probably need. Is a bit like anything in sort of rugby. You physically have to be able to do it, and you can't, if you're in a bit of a rut as a team, you can't hold the ball. We've seen it with Wales. You can't hold the ball, and when you do get the ball, you're under so much pressure. You're either getting rid of it or doing something wrong. So this is a perfect game for Quins to turn around. Steph will be telling his boys, let's get into them. Let's put points on the board. Let's target the set piece, because we've said Swansea struggle in that tight 5. Quins' strength is up front. So yeah, like I said, I am backing Quins. So I think this'll tell us where these two sides are. This is the moment. You're either stepping up. The door is open for both of these sides. Which one of them's stepping through it? Which one of them's going to close it on the other one? Swansea got one of those sort of sides at the moment. I mean, Jermaine is away with under-20s duty, and he's playing really well. That's the sort of player they're going to miss in these sort of games. You would feel, assuming he doesn't get released, and he's going to end up playing with them anyway. But
Sod's law.
yeah, this is such an interesting tie for me. Maybe not in terms of the quality or what it means, but what it means for the clubs.
100%. So that leads us on to the very last game of this round of the Cup, and that is a replay of the league replay we saw last week. That is Ebbw Vale at home to Newport. I managed to get a word in off both coaches by ear, so I'll start with Ebbw Vale, and I'll tell you this in a minute why. So, Jason Strange, we wouldn't read too much into last week's game. It's a new game against a very good team. We are preparing to be better ourselves. There are lots of areas we can improve. Very, very forward thinking, very looking into themselves. You like that approach? And then there's Ty. And I love Ty to bits, because anytime I get a comment off him, I don't get a comment, I get an essay. Absolutely brilliant. So this is Tyrone Morris ahead of Newport's clash this week. So we're looking forward to put it to this weekend and the opportunity to put things right. Credit to Ebbw for their performance. They outplayed us in pretty much every area, executing a simple game plan in tough conditions. They kicked well, controlled the set piece, and were clinical in their approach. As a team, we pride ourselves on playing an exciting, high-tempo style of rugby that puts pressure on the opposition through skill and speed. That's who we are, and we won't move away from that as players or coaches. I strongly believe this is how we develop the next gen as a Super Rugby Cymru competition. However, in the first 20 minutes, we weren't accurate enough, which allowed Ebbw to build a lead. They control possession through a dominant scrum and liner, which has been a hard lesson for us this week. Heading into this weekend, we need to be sharper in on execution and recognize that there are multiple ways to apply pressure, especially in difficult conditions. Hopefully the weather will be on our side, allowing us to put on a fast, high-skill game for the supporters to enjoy. So there's a lot to unpack in there. And I don't know if I'm, again, with anything you read, you can make up your own narrative. And especially when you don't have context, this is not words. I haven't had a phone conversation. This is text. So the reason I pause a little bit in there, because he has said, credit to Ebbw Vale, executing a simple game plan in tough conditions. Now, I could take ours. He thinks Ebbw Vale is simple. He thinks they can't play. So, that obviously not true. And this is something that I just pointing out this week, just as a matter of fact, of what you read isn't always true. The headline is not it is. You make up your own narrative from what you read. I could read out to say, and they've picked a game plan and they have mastered it to execution. They've mastered it. They can't do any better. But I went the opposite way. I went negative. I went, oh, they think they can't do better. So this is something that I find out how people approach things in Welsh rugby. They automatically go to the negative where you can go to the positive. You got to make up your mind for yourself on how things are going. And for this, I'm going to edge on the side of positivity because I'm going to believe that Newport are going to come away from this one with the win. For nothing more than to see the look on Rob's face right now. See, it's always fun when you call an Ebu loss, but just in for this competition in general, it is really exciting knowing minimal number of games, minimal number of points, and this is a must win again for both sides if they want to get into this final. And, even more so for Ebu because they are those 2 points behind. Even a 4-point loss, not a 4-point loss, even if they just lose 4-0 on the points table, they know it's out of their hands. That's the simple reality of what we're looking at here. But yeah, I expect a big performance from Newport after last week. I expected to bounce back. I expect a turnaround. And if I'm being honest, I'm not picking them just because you were Ebu. I'm picking them because of we've seen what Newport sides can do. We've seen them have complete performances. And I think after last week, I think after what has been a very middling season for them, they need that and they're going to want to put it on somewhere. And this has got to be the time for them to do it. This would be perfect for them. So, Ebu Vale, go.
Yeah, I think the conditions are definitely going to play, I think, a major part in this. I think it's interesting to see because what Ty's alluding to is they're going to stick to a game plan. And what that suggests is they're not going to move their game plan to suit conditions. I don't think it's quite as black and white as how I've described it. Don't get me wrong, but the pitch isn't going to have recovered enough. So the pitch is heavy, the pitch was torn up. Even if we've had dry weather from now until the game, we've had mixed weather since the game. So the grounds team have done an absolute fabulous job of getting that game on and sort of the work that they were doing before the game, during the game, with the half time and sort of afterwards. I don't think we're going to see much of a change in conditions realistically. It wasn't raining, and for majority of the game, it was more about the slick ball off the floor and heavy underfoot. That's probably not going to lend itself to the wide game plan, and Ebervale are going to be doing this very, very smartly. And what's interesting is how they've done their front row across the season. They've probably put a lot of the time Luke Garrett and Adam Court on the bench as sort of their own version of Razzie Erasmus's bomb squad. They've recently started splitting those up. So Adam Court started with, was it Morgan Williams? Adam Williams have all been featuring a bit more. You've got Morgan Davis has been back from injury around the Christmas time period. So they've started not trialing new combinations, but moving the props around quite a bit. And that's where it's interesting on how they managed the game last week, as they split Court and Garrett apart effectively. It's going to be very interesting to see if Cam Davis is fit, because we're probably on the sort of the borderline of when he was expected to come back and how Jason sort of plays around that. I think what we will see is a bit more of an open game, and Newport will be wanting to attack this. I think what I take from that statement is hurt. I think Ty and the Newport team physically have been hurt by that result and performance. It's on the telly. It's all for all to see. Yes, there wasn't many travelling fans up, but there was probably a dozen or so down in front of me, and they saw their team do bugger all. This is what it's all about, right? It's pride in these sort of games. it's like the football. If you have your major derby, Everton this season have come away from the Merseyside derby with more points than Liverpool, and they'll be shouting about that right up until the moment the Liverpool lift the Premier League trophy, and they won't care. And this is exactly the same. If you can get bragging rights over your nearest rival, it doesn't really matter about the longer term. It's the Six Nations of as long as we beat the English. Yeah, it's a lot more than that. But a lot of people hold that as the epitome of what it all means. Like I said, this is probably a must-win game for both sides in reality, but more so Ebervale. And I think that's why Jason's going out here with a game plan. They're not going to be worried about watching Llandovery and seeing how many points they rack up to try and chase it on the other side. I don't think Chippy particularly cares about what other teams do. I think I've spoken to him quite a bit, and his prep is largely their own selves. They don't worry about the opposition structure and shape and stuff like that. They haven't got enough time, and they're not a professional outfit who spend 4 or 5 days together in film rooms. So it's very much a case that they will focus on their own game plan. There's probably a few tactical changes. Ryan Jenkins isn't far back from fitness either, which is going to be a boost. But then Lewis Young was my man of the match at the weekend, so he's fully going away and playing some top quality rugby. So yeah, there's probably a bit of a tactical game in terms of who you lay out in the 23 and how, I guess, from Ebervale's point at this stage. I think if you have good conditions, you probably start Adam and Morgan, as your first two props. Leave your sort of your bomb squad to come on and really take advantage. I think that's what we've seen them do against Pontypool this sort of season. And then go from there. They're playing with 3 locks because they're playing with Jack Pope in the back row. And that's really worked well for them, especially at the line-out with the options they've got. And I'm very interested to see then on the counter of that, what Newport do with their pack, because other than possibly Harry Fry, it was probably a starting 8 pack with who they've had available this year. And as Ty's openly said, they lost the scrum and they lost the line-out, and that's Newport's bread and butter. You can't be losing those battles and expect to get a win against a side like Ebervale.
100%. And that does wrap us up for this week. So predictions are all home wins except a debut. And that's from everybody involved, even the man I just spoke to himself. So there we go. I'm only joking about. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening. Like, share, follow, subscribe. All those words are you're so used to by now. Have a friend listen. You never know. They might get off on some quirky humour that I'm sure is somewhere. Obviously, this is going to be you can only listen to this after 11 o'clock at night for obvious reasons. Thanks for that, Rob. But as always, Rob, thank you for joining me. Thank you, everyone, for listening. We will do this all again next time. Cheers. Bye for now.
That was the Super Rugby Cymru podcast. Please rate, review and share us on socials if you can, and join us again next week for more of the same. And until then, enjoy your rugby.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.